Ladies and gents, hey, welcome to the Progressive Sacred coming at you live stream. So I'm gonna hop in, and we have our friends waiting as always, connecting here from Boston. JP and Abby, what is going on, my friends? What is happening in your side of the world?
Rest and relaxation, Julio.
Well, great,
We just
Dunzo.
Between Abby and me today, we probably spent an hour in the hammock. Then we took a nap.
Mhm,
Then we sunbathed.
mhm,
Then we watched some very light TV that we couldn't learn anything from.
mhm.
And then
Oh,
we went out to eat for lunch. And then we came home and just lay on the floor and listen to the radio, listen to
I'll tell you
music.
what. You guys, your levels of sarcasm, I never know when I start to lose track of your seriousness or not. Abby,
Yeah. No,
any of that happen?
no, no,
Okay, well,
no.
check this. Today, here on the Progressive Sacred, want to welcome everyone, first of all. And this is the time where we all get to chat. We love to hear your feedback. We love to connect you with the conversation. And guess what? I missed last week. The busyness of life hit. And so the JP and Abby takeover took place again. We love it when that happens because there's usually some good argumentative discussion between the two of them. But
I think
what
actually last time I started snoring when he bored me.
Yes, she
Oh,
did. It
well,
was
look,
absolutely.
I don't want to get in the middle of that. But what I do want to say, you started talking about creeds and confessions, and then it just went, and I'm like, what is going on? You did want to continue a bit from the past couple of weeks, just take that and traject with it. But give us a little snippets of what's happening because when you say creeds and confessions, I'm like, those are big words in the church calendar, in church liturgy, in church, in the
Mhm,
life of a church.
mhm.
So, and I know we have different opinions often, but I want to know what is happening and how can I dive in and argue with you all. By the way,
Well, you don't need to
first
argue
of
with me
all,
because I'm right.
that's right. You often say
Mhm,
that, and
mhm.
well, some may push back, but saludos y bendiciones from
Only
Doris.
the
That,
foolish
by the
will
way,
push back.
that's my mom. My
Oh,
mommy.
Doris is on. Hey, Doris.
Hi,
I,
Doris.
I love you, bendición. All right, now we can continue, and I won't get in trouble. All right, because I said hello to my mom. Go for it.
So in some ways, the creeds and confession conversation goes back to when we were talking about, we had this really interesting conversation about, is it worthwhile going to church? Is church important? Is participating in religious community important? And then we had a conversation about what are some of the red flags in churches
Mm.
that you might see, because it's really complicated these days. And for some folks, one of the ways that they would choose what church they believe in is by asking, do they confirm the Nicene Creed or the Apostles' Creed? Both John Paul and I grew up in church reciting the Apostles' Creed. Now, for some people, that's a mark of being a part of the real Christian church. But for others, including myself big time,
Pentecostals.
creeds and confessions make me really uncomfortable because essentially a creed or a confession lines out a set of theological beliefs that you must hook, line, and sinker accept and attest to every time you repeat them in church. And so a confession or a creed, so confessions are a little different. Let's just go with creeds, the Apostles' Creed or the Nicene Creed. The Apostles' Creed is one that is fairly standards in churches to say or to affirm. When you stand up in church and say that Apostles' Creed, you're essentially saying, I believe everything this says. Now, that is an enormously different practice than having an affirmation of faith. An affirmation of faith is saying, this is what I personally believe, or this is what I hope to believe, or this person is affirming this hope that we believe in the resurrection, or this hope that there will be healing in the afterlife, or this hope that our broken pieces can be healed by God's love through community. That is a very different statement than saying, I believe in the resurrection, period, hard stop. And so for me, a very healthy sign of a church is a church that doesn't require you to fill in a whole bunch of boxes or check the boxes about what your belief structure is. Because belief is dynamic and it shouldn't. I'm actually used to always talk about belief, faith as being a journey. And I still do like that metaphor, but I really like the metaphor of our faith and our theology as not just individuals, but as the church universal, as being an expanding universe. We're always expanding. It should be dynamic, it should not be stagnant. And confessions are a hard stop, period, stagnant.
All right.
How about that?
How about that? And I'll get back and just want to go ahead. Nicole shares, hey, what's up, Nicole? Didn't know it was a relaxed day. Here I'm reading the Bible and Nathan Margarlet.
Margalit.
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 Margalit. Natan Margalit. Yeah.
And Kathy, who says, what is up? Or no, actually, she says hi. Hi, Kathy. Nice to hear from you. As
Nicole,
usual,
I will tell. Sorry, Julio. Nicole, I will
for it.
tell Natan that you're reading his book. He will be thrilled.
I think I already told him.
He's a super, super nice guy. Just a wonderful person.
So it's often, you know, I'm going to agree and disagree with you. I'm going to push. And so even in our title of our talk today, you know, hey, signs of a healthy church. Like, it's almost like we do that in everywhere as we go. We almost like set up like the check boxes of yes and no, right? I could see where the unhealthiness that you refer of, for example, and please, people out there, don't just shut me off and like turn on your torches and chase me out. Like, I feel the same way about a Pledge of Allegiance, right?
Oh, yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
it's optional.
Absolutely.
Like I do not, you know, if a student wants to, but I don't force people to say that. Let's say in my classroom setting, you know, and I respect. I value more. Let's say I tend to lean towards the view that says, hey, like people fought for this, but also people fought for the right not to say this, right? Or like the back and forth. And the same thing, like the creeds, Nicene Creed, does the Apostles' Creed, those we say it may be unhealthy, but in a way, I mean, it depends on the culture of a church and what they've decided to go with, right? Like, is it unifying a body, right? Is it saying, hey, this is what we as a collective tend to believe, and we're okay that if you don't, you know, then does that say you're not part of this body? Does that make you feel like excluded? The exclusion part, that's where I tend to have more of the issue with, right? Like, to what I believe in a creed, I'm like, you know, as I've grown or as I've, let's say, have learned more on creeds or whatnot, there's some that I could, as going through, you know, I have the Apostles' Creed right here, and I'll say, all right, on this, all right, I'm with it. Ooh, we may have different interpretations in this area, right? And so does that like split us apart? Is that a hey, now we can't be friends or we cannot worship under the same temple? You know, does that draw divisions? And to some it may. And to me, I'm like, no, we're different.
And I've got
So
to say, I hope that nobody hears me saying that if you walk into a church and they have the Apostles' Creed, that definitively repeat the Apostles' Creed in worship, that definitively makes it clear to me that they're an unhealthy church. I'm not saying that at all, truly. But for me, I want to know then more. Do you all really believe the Apostles' Creed? Why do you say it in worship? Does everyone know what it all means? Do you discuss this? Are you open for questions? And a lot of the times the Apostles' Creed is just a rote thing people say with zero understanding. And I actually don't feel as strongly I would never make that statement as much about the Lord's Prayer. I think there's a lot of conversation about the Lord's Prayer, even though it's very much a rote prayer that almost every Christian church says every Sunday. Or some people call it the Our Father. We say our parent in our church, our parent who art in heaven. However, I really feel like often creeds and confessions are never discussed, dissected, expanded. And I don't jive with that as a sign of a super engaged church. How's that?
And
Jive with that?
true, I did not learn or I did not know what I was talking about or saying till about, let's say,
Yeah.
4 or 5 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And let's call it, been part of Christian churches, Catholic and Christian Protestant churches for most of my life. And these are things we say and repeat, and they are, I believe, they're faith forming. And I will make the comparison to a again. I'll bring back the Pledge of Allegiance. If we
Oh,
say, if
absolutely.
we
It's an
say
excellent
things,
comparison.
if we say things enough, we will believe it. We will live it.
Mm-hmm.
We will, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it is shaping to who we are and who we become. So
Mm-hmm.
with that, like if there's a body of people who are like, all right, I just joined this church. I don't know much of.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I think it is a pastor's responsibility. I think it is irresponsible of pastors to not teach on these things. If it's part of our faith forming structure inside that ecclesial body, then we say, all right, then why aren't we teaching right about it? Again, I had to learn about it in seminary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody's gonna go
Mm-hmm.
through that kind of study, those kind of lessons. So why aren't we teaching more about it? Why, and saying like, all right, what we're reciting, you should know,
Mm-hmm.
instead of like the 3-year-old who's reciting a creed or reciting a pledge, have no idea, but eventually it does start to form who you are. It starts to form your faith, your is the word nationalism, like as far as
Oh,
and things like that. And that's where I'm like, well, a little bit of that's where the red flags comes in for me, right?
All right, so let's. I got a couple of questions.
Yeah.
What's the difference between teaching children a creed, right, and just Christian education? I mean, we tell our children, our biological children, as do you, Julio, that God exists, God loves them, Jesus taught us about the love of God, the Holy Spirit inspires us to enact the loving teachings of Jesus. I mean, how is education different from indoctrination?
oh, oh, oh. Well,
That was
So
because
articulate. No, I think
indoctrination, what you
we've
mean
got the
by
answer we need.
it's like, to me, it's so different, right? Because education, there is a conversation. So when I had to stand up, at the sweet Methodist church I grew up and say, and everybody, I'm sorry if you listened to the Progressive Sacred last week, this is a sticking point for me. And God sitteth on the right hand Jesus sitteth on the right hand of God the Father Almighty. I'm still screwed up about why he could only sit on the right, and if they were 2 and 1. I'm still just messed up, right?
It might be metaphorical.
No, but it wasn't.
just maybe.
It
It
wasn't.
might be metaphorical.
But
I'm not sure.
that is exactly the difference between education and indoctrination. Because if I were in a Sunday school class and I could be like, why does Jesus sit on the right hand? Why not the left? How about on God's lap? And, I thought they were one. Well, then education has a conversation about that. It expands my understanding. But for me as a kid, I thought God was on a stupid throne with white beard and Jesus was sitting on one side of him, and that darn Holy Ghost was just going to creep us all out and float through the world. And nobody allowed or had the education, the conversation with me to expand that understanding. So I think there's a significant difference between education and indoctrination in that instance.
There's a difference.
Theoretically, education should welcome questions, and
Yes.
indoctrination does not welcome questions. Indoctrination demands your submission, and education, good education, allows you to ask questions. Now, I did have a professor at seminary who would get visibly irate if anybody asked him a question in class.
Oh, tell me who it was.
I
I
can't.
would.
No, please,
I'll
can we
look.
out him?
Diogenes
All
Hound, we
right,
weren't
all
allowed
right.
to
Okay.
We're
ask him
not. We're not
questions in
tossing
class.
professors
He would
under
get
the
No,
bus,
I want to.
visibly
and
irate.
I
we're
want
not
to.
gonna have JP lose his job. Um, so
You can't.
I would love to see the data on where the movement is. I feel like old school church, me in 80s, 90s, maybe early 2000s, we still in that culture of we don't ask questions back. This is the religious leader, or this is the adult in the room. You don't ask questions back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Until now, a more progressive way of whether it's teaching, whether it's preaching, and I'm talking about literally teaching in within schools, within education, and then within the church body. Like we start to shift into this whole like there are better ways to go about this. Historically, again, we mentioned this before. Probably didn't ask questions because the literacy rate was low.
Mm-hmm.
Like we
Mm-hmm.
didn't know how to speak Latin. We just listened to whatever the priest was saying, and we just kind of nod and we do what they say because we want our sins to be washed away. We want to be good and righteous. So as long whatever we gotta do to not end up in the in hell or whatever it is that we've been told, right? And so now we're taught differently. We're being taught to think for ourselves or push back in some places. I'm not saying everywhere, because I'm sure there are many places that still do not welcome questions. As far as doctrination and education, I like to believe, I hope, that I educate my children. I like the hope that I am an educator, even of 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 the Bible, of Scripture, that I question. I mean, I welcome questions because I believe that the questions also make me, smarter. Right? We say that here.
Oh, or
We
more engaged.
constantly right. We're
Right.
engaged. I
Yeah.
think it's that rabbinical way of like question the question. We're not here to. We may not even get to the end of the journey, right? But we're just
Do you
continuing
let
to
them
appeal.
disagree with you?
Yeah. Oh my,
Yeah, of
Okay.
and I'll
course.
put my son challenges me all the time. This is an
Uh-huh.
11. You want to know humility? Have my 11-year-old son challenges me all the time, and everything within
Mm.
me wants to go back to an old way and say, well, this is the way it is, and because I
Oh,
said so.
oh
Oh,
yeah.
because why would you question authority? Why would you question me?
Oh
But
yeah.
I'm like, hold on, he's on to something real, and so
Yeah,
I remember
absolutely.
um the prayers I said when he was first born. And Lord, like this is your child. Like man, like may Lucas, that's my son's name, grow to be someone who I don't know, but like I can't do this on my own, right? And I gotta believe that
Mm-hmm.
there are ways of shaping his and like he's grown up in the church, right? And there are beautiful things about his faith journey. And as an 11-year-old child, he's been able to question. He's a kid who loves to read. He loves to study. He loves
Mm-hmm.
sciences, and we've done this in our podcast. Talked about science as it contradicts or go along with faith, right? Or complements faith. And so he's asked me the questions that like I believe in science.
Good.
I'm having a hard time believing in faith. I'm
Mm.
having a hard time. And so right there, like I don't just go, well, son, like I don't beat him over the head. I don't send them back to
I
Sunday
think you
school.
should. I
And
think you
then,
should.
whoa, hold up before you get all sarcastic in here, because we're trying to like drive a point, right? And so then I don't bring them to an Apostles' Creed, and I don't bring them to
Right.
a Nicene Creed and say like you need to recite this and you need to learn and you need to know. Right? No, you get to make, and I gotta like honestly, if this is crazy, then it's crazy. But I believe that there's a greater God that I believe in that says I got this. I got this better than you do, Julio. I got this.
Michaela had a really
Yeah, let's
Michaela's, I
scroll up.
think, comparison. Let's put it up. Michaela's, well, I don't know if I'd say comparison. I don't want to put words in Michaela's mouth. But again, like we will say the Pledge of Allegiance,
Hold,
but
let me go
it's
ahead
to
and read it
me,
out. But
yeah,
does it
yeah.
show? But does it show faith? By the way, hi, Michaela. But does it show faith and knowledge to be able to repeat it? I mean,
I
like when
think
we
she's talking about the
compare it
Pledge of Allegiance.
to the pledge, I bet any adult could repeat it. from their school days, but couldn't tell you anything about government,
Hmm.
the name of Speaker of the House, for example.
Right. So I think that's a really powerful example, right? So I think learning about how the American government works, learning our political system is freeing and expansive. Deciding that it is more, let's say, patriotic, the way we could say it is more faithful to be able to recite the Apostles' Creed, or it is more patriotic to be able to say the Pledge of Allegiance, is really false, in the sense that actually learning how the government works in America, understanding that process, engaging in that process, voting in that process, serving on your local governmental boards, even if you have no desire to be a politician, totally get that. But serving and volunteering on your local governmental boards, like that is patriotic. And if you don't want to say the Pledge of Allegiance,
So
to me, that's less symbolic of your patriotism. And again, Kathy Schleck wrote at the bottom of the comments, I love education and embodiment of action and love that God calls us to. And so for me, somebody who can recite the Apostles' Creed is not as powerful as somebody who says, I'm struggling with it, but I'm working out my faith in action. I'm trying to embody it.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, I am certain, recites the Pledge of Allegiance with great fervor. And I'm certain she expects everybody else to recite the Pledge of Allegiance and stand with their hearts and look at the flag and say it with great emotion. And it says, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to one nation under God, indivisible. It says indivisible. She's been saying that with fervor for years. And now what is she doing? She's proposing a national divorce. She's saying that some states should be able to leave because they're tired of all these woke states getting their way and corrupting the good, God-fearing states that, don't want to have gay marriage and don't want transgender children to receive gender-affirming care. So her recital of that pledge, all those years, she's probably said it thousands of times, it did nothing. She said the word indivisible over and over and over again, and it just did absolutely nothing. She immediately, as soon as she gets into power, and I have no idea how a lunatic like that got as much power as she did
Let's not go down
in
the
the
Marjorie
Republican
Taylor
Party.
Greene.
Okay, but as soon as she gets power, she proposes a national divorce. So it's ineffective.
Yeah, I think memorization of creeds and confessions and the reciting of the pledge is not as effective as what you described as conversations with your son, right? Education, this expansion of who we are, this challenge.
I was in the parking lot at a place yesterday, and I saw a bumper sticker that said "God, family, country," right? And then I was like, "Cool."
What is that?
Like, I see what you're trying to say, homie, but didn't God or Jesus speak and say, "Hey, follow me, leave your family if you need to"?
Yeah.
Didn't he also say we're here for the other, not
Yeah.
our
There's,
tribe? You know?
there's a sign
Yeah.
near us that says, actually, we passed it on the way to church on Sunday. It says, God, guns, Trump.
The
What does
trilogy.
that even
Whoa.
mean? What does it mean?
You know,
I don't know.
and that's the thing. I think, and we get indoctrinated throughout different aspects of our lives, right? So whether it's within inside the church or outside the church, but I think even when we get indoctrinated outside the church, now it messes with our theology and what is God about? Well, he's about. Well, even what I just said, excuse my non-inclusive language, God is a he, and he, wants us to be, that there's a clear he and a she, and all these different things, and, in that country, and like he's for us, and not again. What does it mean that the God's for us? But,
Yeah.
just this inclusive group, but
Yeah.
those outside of it, and then you're like, whoa. Again, even, and I would go into, and so this is where, Abby, maybe this may not rub in the same way that you were going earlier. When I said, but then I'm like, yo, go ahead into the Go read the Apostles' Creed. I'm like, this is what we believe, and I'm like, the forgiveness of sins, and these pieces
The
that like
resurrection of the dead.
right, and like these pieces that I'm like, all right, like I could jive with this, man, and like there's parts of this that is beautiful, and like saying like, I don't know that you believe, like you've created your own religion. If you're saying
So,
God, guns, and Trump, you've created your own.
okay, so let's say something about, I'm going to throw another wrench in. Say something about the creeds and confessions. Um, because there is some crazy ass theology out there. And there are denominations where you can just say, hey, I'm starting a house church, and you get a bunch of people coming to your house church on Sunday. And if you're reasonably intelligent and reasonably charismatic, you can teach crazy
Oh
ass
yeah.
stuff that is really harmful to people. So, are creeds and confessions helpful in limiting the crazy, harmful theology
No,
that
Yes.
can be
no,
out there?
no.
And I know that
Yes.
there are denominations that are going to say, we have these creeds and confessions in order to create a community of shared standards
Nope.
that prevents
Yes.
us from harming each
No.
other theologically.
No.
Right?
Yes. I just want to fight
So,
Abby.
No, I just don't think so. And here's why I don't think so. I think that's a really good idea in practice, but I don't think it's true. Because if the creeds and confessions standardized our faith in a way that was life-giving and unity forming, then they would have done that already, because these creeds and confessions have been around for freaking ever. And bad theology still reigns. Exclusive, destructive, spiritual abusing, horrific theology still exists in the mainline church. So no, I think we've seen it doesn't work. And I got something else to say, but fine, Julio.
I think we're speaking from our hurts. I think we're speaking from our past experience, Abby. Like, and I'm trying to like not.
Well, but the
Like,
past experience is real.
huh? Yes, it is real, but we can't just blanket saying no. This isn't doing it. We're forgetting that we're humans. We're screwed up, and like,
But it's not doing it. Like, we've had 1,000 years, 2,000
no.
years of these damn creeds, and they have not done it.
Hey,
I'm not just speaking from hurt. I'm
I
speaking
know
from
for a fact
the reality of being a pastor with people being abused in these mainline churches that are,
All right.
following
Well,
these creeds and confessions.
maybe I'm
abused in
hearing you
mainline
wrong.
churches?
Maybe
Yes.
I'm misinterpreting what you're saying,
Yes.
because what I'm hearing is that because of these creeds were
No, not because of.
like, okay,
In
help me.
spite of.
What do you mean?
I'm not saying because of these creeds. I'm saying in spite of these creeds.
No, I think that the creed, like, there are areas that are doing it healthily and saying, hey, I'm letting you know, this is kind of where we're at. And we don't have the crazy theology that the house church, who's a loose cannon, right? I'm trying to use JP's example, right? So this crazy houses are like, you know what? This is crazy. These creeds, we're starting our own peace. And then when they're in that house church, they could teach whatever they want, right? But
Right,
what we're
and
saying is
I'm
that these
saying-
creeds are like, hey, we may not know it all, but here's our baseline. And within that, we understand that we have people who are coming here who may be reciting it and they have no clue, or using it. There's going to be people who are using it appropriately and some who are using it inappropriately and maybe abusively. I don't know. Or take their own spin on it. And hopefully we could correct those who are using this weapon inappropriately.
My critique of the creeds.
Am I way off?
So we have two conversations going on here. The first conversation is whether the creeds are necessary or not, whether they're inherently good, helpful, or harmful. Number one. And
Can
then
they
the
be
second
updated?
critique is the content of the
They
creeds.
won't be.
Because in my main critique of the creeds and confessions, I'd be much more excited about them if they were really as agapic, as unconditionally, universally loving as Jesus. But you don't get that warmth and that resistance to established and harmful norms of behavior that you find in Jesus' teachings in the creeds. They're very kind of mm,
So
Losers.
there's no, that was articulate. There's no kind of social critique in them, but there's social critique in Jesus. Jesus included the excluded, but the creeds make no demand that the included be excluded. The Jesus was very opposed to material acquisitiveness. The creeds don't mention that. They don't mention money in any way whatsoever, even though Jesus talked about money all the time. So part of my critique of the creeds and confessions is that they're insufficiently based on the life and teachings and ministry of Jesus Christ. They don't come through the creeds. If they did, we might be having a different conversation.
I'm trying to be nice, but obviously I can't be.
so
I'm glad you told us you're trying to be nice.
thank
Well,
you,
I'm
and
I'm
I would
trying
love.
I'm trying not to walk away from this just
Oh,
frustrating
you
conversation.
know what? I think that there is some help in it. Maybe there's more hurt than help. I don't know the stats. I don't know the facts. I would love to update it, like as we mentioned, but they're not.
Okay.
We're not, because who the heck am I? I'm just another lunatic trying
Well,
to
but
start
okay.
who would be considered to have a cult. I don't know that we will have any more Martin Luther's or any more of these people who are like, all right, we're taking this and we're shifting the whole, right? It's
We
just,
are, but I think we are. That to me, I think
will
we
we see it
are.
in our lifetime?
Yes.
Okay.
Who's creating
Yes.
now?
Yes. Okay.
Can we
We will,
pause?
we will
Can we
make
pause?
Christian theology more agapic in our lifetime.
I
All
believe
right.
it. Now, can we pause and take a look, because we're blowing
No,
up
no, we
real quick.
can't. Because what you guys just said, I think, is really harmful. I'm being totally serious. I think what you two are saying is just harmful, limited bullshit.
No cussing.
All right. So it would be
Why?
great to have a standard, a fucking practice for the church.
No cussing.
Guess what? We already have one. It's called the Teachings of Jesus. The Apostles' Creed does not help the mainline church be better Jesus followers at all. It creates some crazy ass parameters of theology, which I don't think in any way, shape, or form model, as you said, Jesus' life, or make sense of our own living experience. I think the creed, the one that we usually say, the Apostles' Creed or the Nicene Creed, are bullshit. They're difficult to understand. They're theologically based. They're not embodiment of love and following Jesus. And we already have the Sermon on the Mount. So why do we need a standard? That is the damn standard. Okay, Jesus' teachings are the standard. The second problem is those creeds will never be rewritten because who wrote them in the first place? A bunch of white men. Okay, maybe they weren't white, maybe they were olive, but they were the powers that be. And so we are constantly excluding people. So did the Nicene Creed or the Apostles' Creed keep women safe from being sexually abused in the church? No! So I don't care if it happens in a house church or it happens in a mainline church. The Apostles' Creed and the Confessions should be thrown out. There you go. But I have something instructive to say once you're all are done with this ridiculousness.
Huh?
Julio's going to read what Nicole wrote, I think. Is that what you're going to do, Julio? And we're all going to take a time out.
Oh, let's.
Actually, Julio, you want me to read it?
I am taking a time out.
I want
You want
to
me
just
to
take
read
a
it?
moment to pray for Abby. Let me put your forehead on the camera. Let me. No, I'm just joking.
No, I'm just
But-
going to rest and I'm going to be away from you all for like 5 minutes and I'll rejoin the
All right,
conversation.
that'll work. What about at Grace Community Boston this week? We looked at healing, ability, and inclusion. At the end, it was told that ramps we being built at a, and then she got
At
cut
the
off.
end, it was told that a ramp was being
That a
built
ramp
at a
was being-
member's house by another member so we can worship and swim and be in community there. That's the spirit and the teaching and all the good things. And Louis Ferrari writes, where can I find the Apostles' Creed in the Bible? Well, actually, in the Bibles in the church that I grew up in, the Apostles' Creed was indeed placed at the end of the Bible.
Pasted in.
We had Christopher Scott. How can it not be true that creeds
It's not
unify
in the Bible.
when the largest unified Christian church uses one? I don't quite understand the question. If somebody can clarify for me, so I'm a little slow today.
How
Been
can it not
having
be true that creeds unify when the largest unified Christian church? So you're saying the Roman Catholic
oh
Church uses creeds, and the creeds have kept the Roman Catholic Church together
so
for 2,000 years, more
so
or less,
before
except for the two
before we
schisms.
awaken Abby from her anger slumber, I think that she would reply with, "Sure, but are they really unified, or are they just like speaking something that they're not aware of, or also there are a lot of faults within all systems?" And I think that's what I'm trying to get to. We have them. It helps some people. I'm not saying it helps all people. I'm not saying that this is something that was in scripture. And I'm not saying that it's like we should dismiss it because it was not. Um, so I don't
That
know.
was a little nicer, Julio.
Right? That's what I've been
Where
trying to
can you
say this whole time.
find? Yeah.
Oh, the Trinity question. Yeah. So, first of all, we don't have the time to hit up the Trinity question, and this is not dismissing the question, but no, you're
Oh,
not going
we
to find
should,
it.
but we should.
I mean,
We
we're
can
we're
cover the Trinity in 2 minutes.
No,
yeah.
but Christopher, I don't want you to feel turned off, and we
No, totally,
can talk
totally.
about the Trinity. And
So I don't know
there
if you're
are
trying to
some there
say,
are some biblical references to the Trinity,
oh yeah, of
but the
course.
way that the Apostles' Creed talks about it, no, there are not
I'm
clear
trying
biblical
to I'm
references
trying
to
to see
say
if
that.
Chris is trying to, if he is Trinitarian, or if he's saying like I'm not because it's not found, or just comparing it to not finding a creed in the Bible. So like
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out.
That
Yes.
is true.
The
Yes.
point is
And
the word
Christopher,
Trinity
right
does not
now,
show. Correct.
yeah, so Chris writes the point
Correct.
is the word Trinity
Yes.
does not show up in the Bible. The concept does. So,
Correct.
Christopher, right now, I'm writing a systematic Christian theology based on social Trinitarianism, and I'm sure you'll find that very, very exciting,
So
as does everyone that I mentioned.
so I think one of the things, Christopher, what I'm hearing about your question or your comments, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, that are important, right? Is that we extrapolate, you could say, we interpret things from the Bible. So of course, the creed, the Apostles' Creed and the Nicene Creed, excuse me, as written, are not in the Bible. And so that doesn't mean that they aren't legitimate just because those words aren't in the Bible. I agree with that that concept. However, in my opinion, most of the things that Jesus taught us to do and who to be are not in the Nicene Creed or the Apostles' Creed. Nowhere in the Apostles' Creed does it say you have to care for the least of these. And however you want to use that language, I'm just using one of Jesus' kind of words, the least of these, but Jesus is constantly talking about the marginalized. And nowhere in the Apostles' Creed does it talk about that. And since I did a nice timeout, I feel like I deserve one more minute, which is to
You need
tell
30
you.
seconds.
Okay.
No, just joking. Go ahead.
We a couple podcasts ago we spoke about the advertisement that was played and got a lot of hype during the Super Bowl about He Gets Us, about Jesus. And that was a very, again, divisive and not unifying moment in the Christian church. And I listened to a pretty great podcast, and it's by John Wood Jr. It's a podcast, something angels. I'm sorry, but it's Uniting America with John Wood Jr. And it's this movement that's trying to heal the divides in America. It's quite an impressive group, and I found John Wood so compelling because he takes on this commercial and he offers both sides in the beginning. You know, what's not so great about this commercial? What's so great about this commercial? And then he says, well, I do, as specifically somebody who's a follower of Jesus, I do think we need more Jesus in our country as a healing, unifying principle. But he goes on to talk about that healing, unifying principle as being agapic love. And I really encourage people to listen to this podcast, 15 minutes long. But why I find this so compelling is I feel like the Apostles' Creed is disunifying because it makes us check a bunch of boxes on belief. But why have we never stood up in church? I've never been called to stand up in church and say, are you on the side of love? Are you on the side of love? Why don't we do that in the Christian church? Why don't we stand up and say, I'm on team love. I'm on the side of agapic love that has no limits and no boundaries and no creeds and no confessions.
Abby, my
Because
sister.
when I find most unified about the Christian church is when I'm working with other people for love. Be it in a food pantry, which we do a
Amen.
lot of, you know,
Amen.
be it out protesting, be it serving those in a refugee camp, like whatever it is, I've been with lots of different Christians in those spaces, and that's where I feel most unified.
But you probably feel unified with non-Christians in those
Yes.
spaces as well.
Yes, I
if
do.
they are also
And that's
characterized by
another,
agapic love.
and that's
Would
another
you-
part of this man's argument in this podcast.
Would you feel unified
Mm-hmm.
with your brother, sister, with your brethren, sisterin, if they were serving the
Mhm.
the poor,
Mm-hmm.
the homeless, serving meals,
Mm-hmm.
and they were far right conservative?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've had that experience multiple times. And that's the way that I love best to interact with people who have very different faith views than I do. Right? Like I'm a female preacher. I wouldn't be invited into not over 90% of the churches in America. That's really, really hard to be preaching. That's really hard. Julio, the statistics probably higher than 90%.
I want to hope it's
And-
not.
Julio, you got to consider it's the Roman Catholic Church
Oh, true.
plus the Orthodox
True.
churches
Wow. Yeah.
plus all of the
You're right.
evangelical and fundamentalist Protestant churches.
Yeah, so not just Protestant.
The only churches you have that are going to let a female preach are the mainstream Protestant churches.
But so anyhow, so in worship, I don't feel unified, right? That's why I bring that up. I feel really excluded. And I'm not saying I need to preach every time I'm in church. I'm not really saying that. But that's kind of very much in my face because that's what I do. That's what I feel called to and what I'm good at. But if I'm with the same members of that kind of, let's just make up an imaginary congregation that doesn't believe in women's ordination, right? If I'm with that group of people and we're working on a Habitat for Humanity house, or we're bagging meals for folks without homes, or we're protesting in Philadelphia, as I did, to make sure there were not rules put in place that people can sleep on, benches. Like, yeah, I feel so unified because we are working with love. We are
Okay.
working toward love. We're on team love.
And so I thank you for your answer and just, not pushing buttons, but want to see where we go because
Well, if you push buttons, I can put my head down again.
and just like when I think of then is there a statement that we say or is there a creed long enough to like, hey, check most of these boxes or something? I mean, Chris says yes because it would be a huge creed then. No? It would be the Gospels really.
Mm,
Thank
that's
you, Chris.
interesting.
And so I'm thinking like, would there ever be any statement creed that unifies us all? And if you say no, okay, then I'm like, in my head, I'm like, well, then this is back to the creeds and saying in
But
a
we don't-
church, saying this
I
is
don't-
kind of where we like lie. This is where we kind of rest, and this is our tradition. This is and like that churches and people are often can't get away from traditions, even if they don't know why or how. Right? I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying, but does it like keep a group and say, all right, or maybe it doesn't unify us as the Holy Catholic Catholos like church, right? Big C.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe it says, hey, this is kind of where we're at, and it unifies us. And but we do love, and we want to serve alongside with. We'll serve alongside with anybody. Like I just
What creed or confession did the apostles recite? First
they
of all, let's just make clear that the Apostles' Creed was not written by the
By the
apostles.
apostles. No.
Okay, it was written well after the Nicene Creed, and it's a Western creed, only in the Western Church. So
right. Well, this
just
needs to
clarify
develop,
that.
and
What
then
and
and that
what
like, go ahead.
okay, what creed or confession did the apostles have?
None.
No, but they didn't have a New Testament. They didn't have right. No.
But you know what they had? They had an agapic meal.
Mm, this is very
Epic
good.
meal. Yeah. They
I would
had
like to agree
so.
with. I would like to agree with Abby on this.
Woo!
High
Thank
five.
you, Julio. So but they were unified, right? They were unified by the person of Jesus, not by a screed that they all believed in, not a shared ideology. And they were unified in their spiritual growth or their religious development under the tutelage of Jesus, inspired by his life and by his teachings and by his ministry. And they were supposed to be unified by their love for one another. Of course, they were still, competing with each other. And James and John were saying, like, we're number one. And Jesus said, I love this. Are you ready to drink the cup that I drink? And they were like, yeah, we'll drink the cup that we drink.
Let's
And
do
Jesus
it.
got crucified, flogged and crucified.
They're like, let's
Um,
do it. But now we like slice other people's ears off, and then we like deny them. And
right. So, well, what I'm saying is that if the earliest Christians, the disciples of Jesus, who were really Jewish disciples of a very charismatic Jewish rabbi, if they were united by his life and teachings, then we can be united by his life and teachings. We don't need necessarily a shared ideology. And the other thing going on is if you look at other religions, they don't have creeds and confessions like we do. It's a very kind of a strange Christian thing. The Muslims don't really use them. The Jews only kind of developed a few in reaction to encountering Christian creeds and confessions. And then, the Hindus never had any. The Buddhists probably came closest to having like a systematized set of teachings. So they may not be as important as our history tells us they are, because comparative religion suggests that they're really not essential.
and so I hope you hear when I say that. Yes, I don't think we need them. Do we need them? I personally, me, Julio Nieves, does not personally believe that we need, because it's not essential to be a person of faith, or for um but though it has caused harm, though we as leaders in churches or in places have misused them, it can help some people. It can be helpful
So,
to
yeah.
some,
So, by the
and it
way,
may be
I've
the
got to go
minority.
live out Jesus' love. John Paul will explain.
And so, yeah,
Abby's leaving now to deliver meals to temporarily unhoused persons. So she is just being, yeah. She really believes Jesus knew God and taught us the way of God, and she really lives the way that Jesus lives. There's just zero hypocrisy to her whatsoever. So that's what she's doing right now. I'm really good at thinking. She actually does things. I actually think Jesus prefers the latter.
I'm really good in questioning, and I think living out the whole Jesus thing, even though I don't do it perfectly. Not even sometimes I may even say not even close. I'm more of the disciple apostle type, the type who've experienced it and says, I'm here and I'm with you. But then I'll quick grab a shiv and stab somebody if I need to, for the purpose of Jesus, of course,
Yeah, anything for Jesus.
anything for Jesus. Even to the point of even hiding my faith because I feel ashamed, not ashamed of who Jesus is, but more of like who some of the followers of Jesus have become.
Ashamed you
Again,
Christians
and
say they are.
will even include myself in that list. That there has been times that I've been ashamed and I should not call myself a Christian. So that's my apology and my confession, um, which is, I believe, in the creeds or confessions or something. I don't know. JP makes a good point there. Muslims or Jews believe in love. That doesn't make them Christians, though. There are clear components or concepts such as the Trinity or resurrection that make one a Christian. No? Question mark. I think the creeds help identify those concepts. For instance, if you walk into a church that believes Jesus was the Son of God but doesn't believe he resurrected, he would he would we feel about how would we feel about that? Okay. So questions and shout out. And
It's well stated, Christopher. And I think, yeah, I don't know. I'm a moderate. Hey, Julio, could we close? I've been reading what Nicole wrote, and
where did I miss any more writings?
it's up in the middle. It's actually about one third of the way down,
Oh,
and it'd be
a
actually
big
be a
one.
good thing to close because we're at time right now.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and read this, and then we're going to close out with reading the Apostles' Creed in unison. All right.
Yeah, that'll be great.
This is a big one. I do think the creeds do belong in Christian education, not so much in the worship service. I do want to analyze them and find out the why behind it all. The priest last week did touch on the communion of saints, and I tried to hear and understand. I think he said something about Protestants think, and he chuckled, that they have a direct line of communication to God without the saints helping out. I do believe I can talk to God directly. Am I thinking too highly of myself? Is that self elevating? By the way, here's a song I just heard today called Truth Be Told by Matthew West. I love these lines. There's a sign on the door that says, "Come as you are." But I doubt it. Because if we lived like it was true, every Sunday morning pew would be crowded. But didn't you say the church should look more like a hospital, a safe place for the sick, the sinner, and the scared, and the prodigals like me?
And the scarred,
Oh, and the
scarred,
scarred. Sorry, did I
the
say scared?
prodigals like
The
me.
scarred.
Yeah,
Yep. Thank you for that.
well written, Nicole. And yes, I think the church should look and function more like a hospital, and certainly not like a place of competitive virtue signaling where everybody goes and pretends to be perfect and have it all together, because none of us do. And if we're honest with each other about that, we can make each other's lives better. But if we're dishonest with each other about that, we're going to make each other's lives worse.
I wish, I wish that humanity would look like this. And then I'd put extra pressure on the church who are making big claims and not following through and being divisive and not hospitable like. So thank you, JP. Thank you, Nicole, for that. Let's let's live it out. Let's live it out. I'm so thankful that Abby is out living it out right now, and I know JP. How are you living it out in this place in life right now? What's going
At this
on?
point in life, I have to admit,
If it's okay to ask, I
no,
don't.
it is. It
Okay.
is. I mean, my highest respect is for people on the front lines of Christian service. So the people who are, feeding the poor and working with the temporarily unhoused and the ministers, whatnot. My highest respect for them. I do believe that my call is to help people who wrestle with faith, help them to realize that wrestling is part of their faith. And and to make them feel more comfortable with faith and doubt as two sides of one coin. And they're the sides of the coin of a life lived in relationship with God. Because if you're not living your life in a relationship with God, there's really nothing to doubt. So you don't experience doubt. I mean, if you're a cynic, you don't doubt. But if you're faithful, you're going to doubt. And that's fine. And that's kind of, I think that's my main function in the church universal right now.
No, shout out to those who, as you say, in the front lines. But I shout out, and I feel like the way that I live it is just on a day to day, and it no longer looks in front of a on the church altar, or inside a church, as far as a staff or a preacher. Though I preach places and stuff like that, cool. But as an educator in my daily life, I think that that's how I have to often remind myself, why is it that I treat people the way, and when I treat somebody poorly, I'm like, get a kick in the pants and say, like, I got to realign, right? And I think that's back to that whole, like, the mission field outside of our stereotypical, like, so I'm not looking at it as I'll elevate those like a preacher and a pastor and a missionary. Like, no, kudos to them. That's your place. But also important, the custodian and the way that I also treat another coworker or such. Ah, so many
Awesome.
things.
Well said.
Thank you, JP. Thank you so much, and thank you for the way that you explain things. And sometimes, I'll be honest, it's over my head, but that's your thing. Just giving us a different perspective.
You got
And
to tell me when
sometimes,
it's over your head because I'm trying not to do that.
no, it's
Trying to be
I
accepting.
catch on. My English is getting gooder,
Good.
and so but with that,
Better.
friends, we've come to the end of our time. And I want to appreciate you all for the way that you participate and connect with us. We're here hopefully weekly. And so, yes, from JP, Abby, and myself. JP, any last words?
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your input and contributions.
Peace.